Hi everyone, and welcome to ITAD in 15. After a short hiatus, we're back with new panel discussions covering all things ITAD, from processes and sustainability to sanitisation and security, to give you, the viewer, some practical news, guidance, education, everything in the world of ITAD. So today I'm joined by Frank Miller, who is from IT Asset Management Group in the US, an ITAD based in the US, but Frank is known for transparency in ITAD operations and shares his facility online to educate customers and the sector on what a compliant and secure ITAD looks like. And then we've got Kyle Marks, who is the CEO of Retire IT, which is a value-added reseller of ITAD services. Kyle has also been leading efforts to challenge the ITAD certification industry, highlighting failures in enforcement that put the credibility of certifications and the industry at risk. And lastly, we've got Amanda Harris, who is the Director of Support Operations at Centerprise, which is a UK-based company specialising in IT solutions and managed services. ITAD. With 25 years of experience in ITAD, Amanda brings deep expertise in standards, compliance, and operational best practices. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So the aim of today is to discuss the hidden risks of non-compliant disposal. ITAD vendors are meant to reassure clients that their data-bearing assets are handled securely and responsibly, and yet even in certified environments, we can see that failures do still occur. So assets get lost or stolen or mishandled, and it leaves the client exposed. So let's discuss why non-compliance persists and the consequences it creates within the industry, and potentially how we can all take more ownership of it. So I'll start with Amanda. From your experience, what is the biggest hidden risk that organisations overlook when choosing an ITAD partner?
Thanks, Zoe. So from my experience, the two biggest tends to be around the logistics and also ensuring chain of custody. So whilst companies will ask what our process is initially regarding data destruction, and around 20% of companies that we deal with will take us up on doing a site visit to our processing facility, they rarely ask regarding the logistics, how the equipment will be collected, how we ensure chain of custody. So they've got to be the two main areas. We've never been asked to provide details of what our policies are in the event of a breakdown, vehicle accident. As long as they get the equipment, as long as they get a signed collection note, whether that is box count or scanned count, that's something we do as standard. It's not something that they tend to ask us for, and they rarely ask us for evidence such as GPS tracking or the chain of custody paperwork, which we obviously supply anyway. But that's got to be the two main risks that we see.
That's really incredible that it's as low as 20%. And Frank, you're probably good to comment on this as well, because you do quite a lot of work trying to further the sort of education of the customer and showing them how a facility works. Would you agree with that? Is it sort of a lack of questioning from the customer as well?
Yeah, I can confirm what Amanda is saying, that very few questions are being asked about those types of policies. A breakdown is a really good one. I also think it's probably 1 out of every 100 contracts. There'll be 5 phone calls about negotiating prices and no phone call about visiting our facility or seeing us in action that we can do what we're saying we're doing, on paper. So I think there's a lot of risks that can be uncovered by physically going out to a vendor and seeing what they're about and what they can accomplish. Yeah, so I concur for sure.
It's really interesting, isn't it, when it's people's data that's the thing that they should feel, so onerous of, and then actually it's, in a lot of cases, it still seems to be as soon as it's out the door, as long as I've got my bit of paper to evidence, that's sort of where my due diligence ends with that. But Kyle, you wrote an open letter to certification bodies. I think the customer often sees a badge or knows somewhat about certifications within the sector. Do you think that the the responsibility should lie with the customer and the education on the certification body on making sure that the audits are rigorous and like data secure and all of that, or do you think it lies with the ITAD? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it lies with both. The Wisestack Iron Mountain breach has taught us a lot. It reveals about everything wrong in this industry. Just to kind of recap shortly, a driver working for a vendor that had multiple certifications was sentenced for stealing thousands of laptops and computers for more than a year. The owner of the ITAD has kept the clients in the dark. The certifying bodies have refused to take any action, conduct impartial investigations, or enforce the penalties. It reveals also that the end users, the clients, learned nothing from the Morgan Stanley breach. And just to refresh everyone's memory there, in the breach with Arrow Electronics, Morgan Stanley discovered it when they undertook what they called a cross-check reconciliation of assets that it believed Arrow had in its possession. So what we've learned is that certifications, are acting as more of a badge, a marketing badge. They can't be trusted to prevent breaches, to enforce compliance of their own published standards, or to protect the constituents who rely on them. And my company is one of them. We contract with ITAD vendors to perform work on behalf of our clients, and we've always worked on the biggest proponent of certifications because it separates the good from the bad. But we rely on them for other things, like NAID AAA is all about attesting to the vendor being compliant with the law. And nobody will deny that the Wisestack Iron Mountain breach was a breach, thousands of assets unaccounted for, but yet no end users have been notified. And so it also tells us that the certifying bodies are have learned they've been very selective and subjective in enforcing their compliance. So there's been a large number of vendors who have reached out and told me that they feel it's like a two-tier system of justice, where certain vendors will be picked on and will be penalized and others won't. So there is a silver lining in that. I think we're recognizing that there's a huge difference between certification and verification. And unfortunately, bragging about certification is sort of like bragging you have a driver's license. I mean, it just proves you can do something. And we can look at, for instance, DISA is very big into certifying the effectiveness, the efficacy of erasure software. Erasure software verifies every sector is wiped. We need that same thinking when it comes to chain of custody verification. We need to prove that every asset has been accounted for. And you started by asking a question, of Frank and Amanda about, what is the biggest shortcoming. I actually believe it's that we think it's, choosing the vendor is the most important part, whereas managing the process is actually the biggest, vulnerability, because you're picking a qualified vendor like IT Asset Management Group, is relatively easy, especially if you go visit the facility and you read about, and understand. So it really has taught us, that that trust is for friendship, verification is for compliance. We need to take a page from cybersecurity. And unfortunately, at this moment, unless the certifications come forward, it's proving to us that certifications protect the vendor and they don't protect the enterprises that rely on them.
Yeah, one of the things that sprung to mind as you were talking was that it really is the end user at the end of the day that it's their data that's breached. And over here in the UK, the Information Commissioner's Office did a really cool campaign about the effects that has when your data is leaked, and it was just putting the consequence onto one individual of how detrimental that can be. And I think the education piece is there across the sector. What more can every individual stage be doing? So Frank, I've got a question for you as well. From an operational perspective, where do breakdowns most often occur? Do you think it's logistics, chain of custody? Is it data wiping? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'd say all of those things have one thing in common, and it requires people and processes to go well. And like Kyle was mentioning, if an end user has no asset management practice and has no good data protection policies and processes in place and accountability for it, choosing a vendor is not going to mean much, because then you're just trusting whatever that vendor is saying they're actually doing.
Yeah.
And then that's when, disasters can really occur, because no one's checking what's happening. So in reality, there are organizations that don't need sophisticated ITAD providers, because they can do all of their data destruction in-house, do very good asset management, package those assets clean, wiped, verified. You could even bring in third parties to do it from your site. And then you can dispose of it with more of an environmental compliance than a data security aspect. There. You can do on-site hard drive destruction with a vendor, but this is one of those things that our industry has created this problem, because we've told customers this myth of indemnification, that we can solve all your problems. It's easy. We're certified. Just hand us the kit and we will clean it up for you and everything's okay, and wrap it up in a nice package. And not to blame the customers again, but their attention span for this is also low. So, you can't fix asset management at disposition, right? And that's what a lot of customers are trying to do. And that's, as an industry, what we're trying to do. So it's difficult, because we have to meet the customer where they are and bring them where we want them to be. Yeah, I'll end on that little phrase, I guess, that I just made up. So.
No, that's good. You should write it down and use it. That was really good. Amanda, do you see that, talking about the customers, or when a tender comes in, do you think that there is an element where the competitive bidding pushes vendors to take shortcuts and increase that risk? I ask because obviously Centerprise is a standard 8 certified company, so you're a part of a standard that's officially approved and aligned to law. So you must come across that quite a lot when you're looking at tenders.
Yeah, public sector tenders are interesting. So they vary so much. They have progressed quite a bit over the last few years. So they're darn sight better than they used to be, but there's still shortcomings. We're still seeing tenders coming out where the most important thing to them is that the service is cost neutral, no charge to them. Some of the tenders come out don't even ask simple questions around certifications, chain of custody. It's literally 1 or 2 questions asking for our process around data destruction and how we're going to return money to them and make it cost neutral. The newer ones that we've seen in the last few months, we are starting to see ADISA mentioned more, which is good. And we are starting to see some public sector tenders come out where they have done their homework. They've obviously taken wording from the standard and put it in the tenders, which is a great improvement on what we've seen sort of 5 years ago. But there's still quite a lot of shortcomings within definitely public sector in the UK.
Yeah, I even in the time that I've worked in the sector, you can see how things are starting to improve. It takes a long time. I mean, I took a call from someone the other day that said, well, we're a charity. Why would I have to pay for that service? And you have to sort of explain that if you want security, if you want, that higher level of service, it ultimately is going to come at a cost to someone. And it's that educational piece with the customer, I think, across the board, and of course with the ITAD in making sure that compliance isn't a badge, it's a process, it's a way of thinking. It starts from the ground up. It's in every part of the process that you're making sure that you're doing things the right way. So I just wanted to close off with a question to you all, and I'll start with Carl. What can the industry collectively do, or what's one piece of advice for ITAD providers to differentiate themselves on compliance?
I think a client should a vendor should ask the client after they've made their pitch and they've reviewed the program, ask, do you want this to be verified? And that simple question will invariably cause a discussion about what do you mean? What do you mean by verification? And it'll uncover, any misconceptions, any false beliefs, or anything that it also brings into the conversation people outside of procurement. It brings in people from governance, risk, and compliance, and that ultimately will change the trajectory of our industry when people start thinking about this more as cybersecurity and less as moving boxes and one step above taking out the trash. So asking a client how they want this verified, if they want this verified, they'll reveal if they think it's already assumed to be done, and it'll have a great conversation around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Frank, what do you reckon? What's one piece of advice that you could, I don't know, I suppose relay on to any ITAD?
So I, as an ITAD, would focus on turning your customer-facing employees into consultants. And I think we're going to see more and more. There's going to be salespeople that are selling best practices and real answers as opposed to easy answers. And conversations like this are furthering that information out. And customers are going to see these types of conversations and see these types of answers. And if your salespeople are giving easy and false answers to compliance and security measures, you're going to get left behind in the sales cycle by people who can give the real facts of what security and asset management good practices look like.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, and being able to relay that onto the customer, it's the long game. Everyone struggles with motivating them to pick the right vendor. But I think that's a really, really good one. Amanda, what do you reckon?
That's a good question. So differentiate themselves on compliance and a bit of advice for ITAD providers. So I would say always be completely open, transparent with your customers. Always invite them to come and see your facility, the processes. I mean, personally, we've obviously got ADISA and like 12 ISO standards. So that differentiates ourselves against our competitors, as the majority of our competitors don't have that same level of certification. But I think at the end of the day, yeah, make sure your salespeople are saying the right things. Make sure you're completely open, transparent, honest with your customers. Tell them what the risks are and the best thing to do moving forward.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, all three of you, for taking the time today. And yeah, that concludes this ITAD in 15. So many thanks and have a good weekend.
Thank you.
And you.
Yeah.
Cheers, Zoe. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Yeah, thank you so much.